Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40k universe. I am your host, Gershwin, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about Space Marine chapters as we get into the Sons of Dorn. A very interesting, very detailed chapter. If you're new to the channel, subscribe because we post Warhammer 40k content every single day. And of course, if you have any requests or suggestions, comment down below. We read that every single day. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Sons of Dorn. The Sons of Dorn is a Loyalist Codex Astartes compliant Space Marine chapter and a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists. The Sons of Dorns primarily wear black power armor. The Aquila or Imperialis on the chest guard, the faceplate, shoulder plate trim, gauntlets, and knee guards are white. The Battle Brothers of this chapter are known to carefully inscribe intricate scroll work and blessed prayers to the Emperor in High Gothic script upon the ceramite surface of their battle plate. The Sons of Dorn's chapter badge is a white clenched fist, similar in the style of the chapter iconography of the Imperial Fist, superimposed on a red roundlet centered on a field of black. The Sons of Dorn were founded in the 34th millennium during an unknown founding using genetic legacies of the Imperial Fist Primarch Rogal Dorn. Members of the Crimson Fist chapter were chosen as the representatives of the Adeptus Astartes to help form their newly founded chapter. The Sons of Dorn were given feudal rights to Archaea by the High Lords of Terra to serve as their chapter planet, the home of their fortress Monastery and the source of their aspirants. The early exploits of the Sons of Dorn were not known outside of their home sector for nearly a century, until their second chapter master, Polus Lucius Alexandros, known by some as Alexandros the Great, rose to prominence. Coming from humble origins, Alexandros was the first chapter master of the Sons of Dorn to have been born on Archaea, and therefore became the first chapter master to descend from the honored families or lineages of the Archaean nobility. He became renowned for leading his fleeting chapter on a massive crusade across two segmentums and into the Eye of Terror itself. Over the course of 6 Terran centuries, Alexandros led the Sons of Dorn in a reconquest of many former imperial worlds, freeing them from the clutches of heretics, the apostates, and the Xenos. But this great conquest occurred near the Eye of Terror. Alexandros could not rest knowing that the enemies of the Emperor continually assailed mankind. He was forever seeking opportunities to lead his chapter on a campaign. As a result, the Sons of Dorn were rarely at full strength, though what they lacked in number was more than compensated in their determined fervor. Several sectors adjacent to the Eye of Terror were ultimately brought back into the Imperial fold by the actions of the chapter. These sectors fell under the protection of the Sons of Dorn. A contingent drawn from the chapter continuously guards this feudal land to the present day. Alexandros continued to lead his chapter for almost 600 standard years before he was brought low by a Chaos Champion's plague weapon that dripped with the foul pestilence of Nurgle. Instead of succumbing to the virulent plague that infected and ravaged his body, he managed to survive for several more months before the disease finally broke down his genetically enhanced Astartes immune system. His body was interned within a stasis sarcophagus and sequestered within the vaults of the sacred chamber of the Temple of Resilience, located in the chapter's fortress Monastery. Some within the chapter whisper that the chapter master lies there, waiting until such times as a definitive cure for his illness can be discovered. On that day, his sarcophagus will be open, and Alexandros the Great will stride forth once more to lead his battle brothers to glorious battle. The Sons of Dorn's chapter homeworld of Archaea is a lush, temperate world with a global climate very similar to that of Terran's ancient Mediterranean region. It has some very large land masses, but the majority of its land area is made up of numerous island chains. It is a feudal world that never progressed far beyond a pre-industrial state. and most advanced technology is reserved for the larger cities and the ruling elite, though the planet is dotted with several large cities and its primary covered by small townships and farming villages. Of course, each of these is usually dominated by a sprawling villa belonging to some member of the patrician or noble class. The cities are described by many imperial visitors as being both majestic and breathtaking. The neoclassical architecture of this world is very similar to that of Macragge or the ancient Romani of Terra. Built mostly of white marble, the Archaeans constructed monuments involving both architectural and engineering skills, including vast edifices such as bridges, aqueducts, amphitheaters, and triumphant arches, as well as temples and palaces for the patricians. Archaea was once considered a world of beauty, with its rolling hills, crystal-clear seas, deep, luscious forests, and majestic cities. However, almost all of this is now nothing more than fond memory, after the world was ravaged by a splinter fleet of High Fleet Leviathan. The world has been left barren and desolate, with only a few barely inhabited cities remaining. Only a small defense force of Astartes remained to protect the chapter homeworld when the Tyranids came, for most of the chapter had left to prowl the stars to seek out and battle the enemies of mankind in their newly gifted space fortresses. Archaea is a hierarchical and class-conscious society, but there is always the possibility of movement between the socio-economical classes, because class is no longer determined solely by birth. For the most part, Archaean society is described as a republic, although the Sons of Dorn themselves are known to take direct control of the state in times of national emergency or when absolutely necessary. Family lines, so-called lineages, play a very important part within the Archaean society, extending even into the culture of the chapter itself. Archaean culture has often been described as being very similar to that of ancient Terran Renaissance during the mid-2nd millennium, with the wealth dispersed throughout much of society, except for the very poorest of the free men and the class of indentured servants who serve the patricians. The planetary government is located in the Archaean capital city of Capuas, a city described by the prominent traveling scholar Danius Ambnus as one of 1,500 wonders of the Segmentum Solar. Its streets spiral out from a central courtyard, or forum, which houses the mansions of its wealthiest citizens and the soaring ivory towers of the political sector. Every building is carved out of marble and inlaid with intricate reliefs and sculptures dedicated to heroic battles from the Sons of Dorn's history, alongside many of the world's mightiest heroes. A popular attraction for its citizens and visitors is the Gladion, a towering amphitheater which is home to brutal displays of vicious combat. Often, criminals or slaves are tested in the Gladion by being thrown in against vicious chrono-gladiators, favored champions, or sometimes even Astarte warriors. The latter usually only participate in order to fend off boredom, hone their battle skills, or punish those they see as being particularly unworthy. However, on occasion, an Astarte will be thrown into the Gladion as punishment for some failed task. He is stripped of his rank, his power armor, his war gear, and most terrible of all, his name, and thus his lineage. If he survives for a certain number of games and shows proper penance for his failure, he will be allowed to rejoin the chapter with his rank and honor intact. While in the Gladium, or the pits, as members of the chapter refer to it, Astartes are shown no favoritism and are mercilessly harassed by the baying crowds and shunned by their society until they can once again prove their worth. Like their fellow Imperial Fist successor chapters, the Sons of Dorn venerate the Emperor of Mankind as the gene father of the Adeptus Astarte, though not as a god, and Rogel Dorn as the Primarch of the Imperial Fist Legion, and thus their own founder. As a chapter of Space Marines recruited from a single planet, each battle brother of the Sons of Dorn shares a common cultural bond. Lineages play a key role in the society of Archaea, and the Sons of Dorn themselves. It is a matter of great pride and honor for an Astartes of this chapter to say he descends from an ancient Arcanian lineage. Where most Space Marine chapters try to distance their battle brothers from their lives prior to being inducted, the Sons of Dorn strongly encourage and maintain the family ties. It is not uncommon for a great-grandfather, uncles, cousins, and even brothers to serve amongst the chapter's ranks. The only relation not allowed is that of a father and son, as it is deemed too strong an influence that could break down the chapter's formal bond of authority. Usually a father would have to be inducted into the ranks before his son was ever born. This can lead to the son believing there can be a possibility of a relationship being formed with a father that he has no wishes to partake in, beyond the honor of a shared lineage. Due to the same family name being possessed by many Astartes in the same company, sometimes even in the same squad, it is a custom to address the battle brothers of the chapter only by their first names. This is only allowed within the chapter's ranks, and it is a terrible insult for a son of Dorn Astarte to be addressed this way by an outsider. There are fears amongst other chapters that this is a practice that could lead to nepotism, but this has never occurred. In fact, the most famous Archaean lineage, that of Alexandros, has many of his descendants inducted into the chapter as Space Marines, but they have never passed above the rank of the common battle brother. However, the chapter's two most famous Astartes were both of the same lineage, and both rose to the rank of chapter master. They played vital roles within the chapter's history, something that many rival chapters are quick to point out when the Sons of Dorn claim that their strong family ties have played no part in the governance of their chapter. The Sons of Dorn follow the Codex Astartes in all matters of organization, with one exception. The chapter's number of apothecaries far exceeds the number of normal present in a single chapter. The Sons of Dorn are renowned for their advanced medical practices, which focus on disease and how to best combat it. The apothecarium of the chapter's fortress monastery is vast and houses some of the most deadly strains of diseases known to man. These samples are used for study in the hopes of finding vaccines to best combat them and further strengthen the immune system of all Space Marines. The Plague of Unbelief and the Destroyer Hive are the two deadliest warp-touch strains currently possessed by the chapter. The apothecaries have worked for millennia to find cures to these horrendously powerful and virulent strains, but so far they have not succeeded. While the Sons of Dorn do have a homeworld in a fortress monastery, for the most part they are a fleet-based crusading chapter. And although they follow the tenets of the Codex Astartes in their basic pattern of organization and order of battle, in practice, the chapter has modified its tenets to better suit the needs and patterns of their deployments. An example of this is the chapter's company captains and other senior ranking officers are also assigned flag command of a particular starship in the chapter's fleet, and are expected to act autonomously of higher authority for long periods if needed. The chapter's veteran first company, called the Praetorians, and the elements of the 10th Scout Company are nominally based on their chapter's mobile fortress, with a majority of their number being dispersed as needed to individual commands, which can vary considerably in size and operational requirements. As a fleet-based chapter, the Sons of Dorn are rarely gathered en masse except at the commencement of a major crusade called by the chapter master. Most often, the forces of the chapter are dispersed to multiple task forces, which are deployed to various expeditions and war zones spreading all over the galaxy. One of the traits required of aspirants for full initiation into the chapter is to be infected by a particularly powerful strain of disease held within the chapter's apothecarium. In reality, it is impossible for a non-Astarte to actually survive, but this is not expected. The aspirant must show that he can instinctively accept his fate and place his trust in the Emperor and the chapter's Primarch, Rogel Dorn. thus proving that he can master his fear in the face of imminent death, as all Space Marines must do. If the aspirant can do this and survive for his predetermined amount of time, he is administered the vaccine and considered ready to begin the process of being implanted with his gene seed organs. Due to this and other highly unorthodox and dangerous training practices, the Sons of Dorn have developed an extreme resilience to most forms of diseases, even for Astartes. The final test for a neophyte after he has completed the biological transformation into an Astarte, but before becoming a full member of the chapter, is to learn the terrible secret of the treachery and betrayal of the former chapter master Alexandros, the Mad, that resulted in the chapter war that nearly destroyed the Sons of Dorn. The newly inducted battle brother is obligated to make a sacred pledge upon the chapter's honor to guard his most terrible of secrets with their very lives, taking binding oaths of loyalty more terrible than those usually sworn by the average Astarte. Unlike other chapters that may possess a dark past or some terrible secret, the Sons of Dorns do not go out of their way to conceal this information from their junior brethren. Instead, they embrace this dark secret as a part of their heritage and birthright, for their greatest purpose is to rid the galaxy of the madness of Alexandros the Mad and his fellow renegades. One of the greatest secrets of the Sons of Dorn is the process with which the battle brother must undergo to become a chapter master. When Alexandros the Great was on his deathbed, he made one final request. No future chapter master should be allowed to be as weak as he has been. He perceived this weakness as his greatest failure, for he had succumbed to the failure of his own body instead of a respectable enemy in combat. To fulfill this request, his body was placed in stasis upon his arrival at the fortress Monastery, to preserve the ailment that had killed him. Whenever a new chapter master of the Sons of Dorn is chosen, he must pass a test similar to the one he took upon initiation to the chapter. He must drink a small portion of Androlos's pestilent tainted blood. If his body can overcome exposure to the deadly toxins, he is deemed worthy to lead the chapter. It is unknown how many have failed this test, for the chosen successors are given no assistance from the apothecaries and must pass the test on their own. And those were 40 facts on the Sons of Dorn. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is one of the most amazing chapters I have covered. The story behind this is pretty cool because this is actually a, I guess you could say, a fan-made chapter. So it was made by somebody who entered into a competition, but more on that in part 2. There's going to be a part 2 to this story because you have to learn of the betrayal of Alexandros, and all that good stuff. So make sure to subscribe to the channel, and if you like these types of videos, share this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter. If you have a friend who's starting Space Marines and they want to make their own chapter, send them this lore. Show them how awesome and how intricate lore can be for a Space Marine chapter. You don't necessarily have to do the cookie cutter Ultramarine style. You can do, just some. You can go all out. You can bring in history from your own heritage or whatever heritage and culture you like from Earth today, and you can implement that into your chapter. And this is a great example of that. But again, guys, if you like these videos, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And if you want to support us a little bit more, jump on over to Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create more videos. With that said, I'll see you tomorrow with more lore on the Sons of Dorn. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.